What up, guys? Quick update today. I created a blueprint so that I can have one of these random switches, which I think is a switch to an outlet on my countertop. That oh no, this actually is a switch to the sink, to the garbage disposal. We don't have one installed, and the one to the right is supposed to be for a light source up here, but we also don't have one installed, so both of them are null at the moment, and I was looking for something to do with them. So I decided the one on the left is going to be a master switch to control all the other switches in the scene. I have the logic set up currently to where it will switch off all the light sources, point lights, rectangle lights inside of the scene, as well as switch any video material texture to a blank texture and mute the TV that the texture is associated with. And it will turn off any other sort, like electronic devices that have emissiveness to them based on which objects I choose to bring into the blueprint. So what you see here is there's a flip-flop AB. By default, since my lights and devices are on when you press play, A was going to go to the off, and it's going to switch the switch down. So by default, I also have the switch oriented upwards or in the on position. It'll switch the switch down. It'll play a sound at the location, set a material for emissive on the top of the switch, because when it gets really dark in the scene, I have a hard time navigating around and finding switches to turn them back on, since I wanted to use more realistic lighting instead of Archviz lighting. We're going to demonstrate that real quick and just give you a quick run through of how this is set up. So all of my light switches control a blueprint, and the values of the blueprint, such as the point light, rectangle light, or an emissive texture, are brought into the switch blueprint so that I can tell the switch to communicate with that light fixture blueprint and either swap out the texture or change the visibility of the light source. And instead of, well, basically I have 9 different switches, or 12 actually: a master switch, a receptacle switch for any device that's plugged into a wall where it's controlled by a light switch, and then a single source switch, so a switch that would go for a closet that only has one light in it, a 2-source switch, which is one you'd find in the center of the bathroom of a 3-switch box in a bathroom to control the 2 lights in the ceiling, and then it goes all the way up to 9 because there are some rooms and some areas that have 9 flush LED lights. I have a fan switch as well. So all the switch blueprints are different, although they share the same mesh. For some meshes, I set the blueprint up to where there's a material on in 2 additional slots that control the swap of an emissive texture on the top of the light switch and the swap of an emissive texture on the bottom. And I'll demonstrate that really quickly. If I press play, I don't want to go around and turn the TVs off, but I can. But let's say I want to turn everything off at once.
So you're telling me you just didn't see me magically appear out of that stump?
And if you'll notice,
you didn't see any of that? No, but that's...
If you'll notice, all the switches are in the up orientation because all the lights are on right now. But if I turn those lights off and it gets extremely dark in this room as the sun goes down, I want to be able to find those switches so that I can interact with them. For closets, the closet door is closed, so if it's dark in this room, the bottom of the switch, right now it's off, but if I switch this light off, you see it's on right now. If I switch this off, a light source is going to show up on the top while that's off. But if I turn it back on now, any closet door is going to have that light show up at the bottom as well, so that if the door is closed, I can still find the switch when the lights are off in the room. Since the light is in the off or in the on position, we don't want to hide the emissive texture for closet doors in the event that we're not in the closet, since the switch is on the outside of the door. All right, so all the switches now have this emissive texture that turns on and then the emissive texture goes away when I flip the switch again. So if I go and hit that master switch,
Follow the roads where we can make it back before rain.
it'll turn off the microwave, the fireplace, every TV, and any other light source, like ceiling fans. As you can see above this Echo Show, there's this white emissive that tells me where the light switch is. So when I'm walking through the scene, I can find my way around to cut the lights back on. So let me pull the door open. I've got an emissive here on the thermostat. I can turn that off. As you can hear, there's thermostat. There's two sounds, one coming from the AC and one from the wind that's kind of being sucked through the bottom of the door. But I can turn this off or set it to auto. And then if I go over, let's turn on all of my lights. And then I'll turn the TV off. Hey, Zep. Shh, please. If I walk over to the vent, I'll be quiet here. You should be able to hear the fan coming through the vent or the air blowing through the vent. Oh, I didn't turn it on. So here we go. I'll turn it on. And that's true for every vent, although I need to adjust the attenuation so that you can't hear them from the outside. But every vent in the house has its own spatial audio. This is the only thing I didn't include in the master. But yesterday, when walking through the scene, trying to demonstrate my light switch setup, I had a hard time finding the closet light. I believe this one is actually in the on position. So let me turn it off, turn it back on. I still can't see anything, but I see a little bit of the light at the bottom of the switch. And that at least kind of helps me find my way around. So let's go back. I can open the door. Without having to like really know where things are. If I know the layout of the room, I can see this little light, and that helps me find where the closet is. Turn it off. Now it shows up on the top. All right, so every light switch is set up this way. Again, if I were to turn this switch on or turn one switch off, not being able to see this other switch is part of the problem, but also it's not set up on a two-way with two-way logic. So I should be able to push this down to turn the light on after one of the sources is off. That's something I'll work on as well. But I think this is a really cool feature. I've never seen anybody do anything similar. And I want to expand that and be able to create additional, like a modular setup to where you can choose what box type you have, what switch type you have. And I want to be able to have it also set up to where you can do fading. So to be able to change the value from 0 to 100, either by pulling the switch, like the slider up or down, or turning a knob. I would like to have that logic set up as well. First, I'm going to prioritize just doing these types of flat face switches because it's a lot easier to grab and interact with these with your first, with the controller, keyboard, mouse, versus trying to click on the collision box of a traditional light switch, a little flip switch. And yeah, that's kind of the work. I think that's all the work that I did today. I also added an emissive light source inside of the fireplace to make it look a little brighter and kind of expand that light into the room. and I'll showcase that. Another quick tip: if you're using physics and you find that your physics bodies are shaky and jittering, and not staying on their hinges and not locked into their constraints, one of the things that you might need to do is go into your project settings, and I believe it's going to be under engine physics, and then under simulation, or no, frame rate, you want to tick substepping. And then I have my substepping set to 0.01 with 16 max substeps. All the animations felt extremely slow and sluggish, unrealistic, but also any small objects would clip through collision bodies. And even when I had disabled collision on physics constraints where different bodies were connected together that weren't meant to collide with each other, I would get a lot of jittering when trying to pull doors open, and they would kind of break off the hinge temporarily. But now when I click play with these changes, my doors, which are physics bodies, I can
Guardian of the forest.
either click and drag based on my player position and camera position, or I can use my pawn to walk through and push the door open. So I needed to set this logic up on the hit, right? So if I grab here, I'll be pulling at that pivot point. If I grab at the edge of the door, that would be my pivot point. And when I walk towards doors, I don't want those doors to push outward because I'm not trying, these doors are one-way doors. So I want it to be able to grab and pull the door wherever my player's cursor was, and then be able to pull doors closed instead of relying on my body, on my pawn, to push that door, which it still looks pretty realistic. Prior to changing those physics settings, my doors would act really weird, and now they're buttery smooth, and I love it. So I'm not trying to use animations to where the player's grabbing the door. I want the weight. I want it to feel weighted. I want it to feel real. I want it to be practical, and I want it to be accurate. So if I'm doing a architectural visualization demonstration and I'm showcasing different lighting scenarios, I don't want to use Archviz lighting where it's like professionally photographed and bounce lighting has been set up and all the lights are bright white. I want to use realistic lighting to say, hey, if you put these lights that are this color temperature and this amount of lumens in this room, in these fixtures, here's a realistic depiction of what that would look like with the lights on and off. Here's how dark it's going to get when the sun is shining at this time of day or when it's raining. Most architectural visualization projects don't take into account realistic environment changes and how the eyes actually interact with real light. They're really doctored up. They use fake light sources on the outside of the windows, like a rectangle light shining in. They use HDR eyes. I'm using dynamic sky with clouds, with dust and fog and rays and all these different things that kind of change the environment light. Plus, I've got it staged outside that is a little more accurate to like the real life scenario. If I look outside of my window right now, it's grass. There's a golf course right here, and it's a lot of grass. So naturally, any light that bounces, even if the sun is orange and the kind of atmospheric light is a bit blue, there's going to be a lot of green bounce lighting in here that will kind of change the hue of my walls. So I think about those things when setting up my lighting without adding materials. It's like I have green grass outside to help with the global illumination to make this feel realistic. And then when I walk through the house and analyze the lighting at different times of day and the sun position, I replicate that in the project and I make sure that it looks as close to real life as possible. Based on, what my eyes see, I set my exposure up in the project. Instead of using the post-processing volume, I use the exposure settings inside of the Ultra Dynamic Sky plugin. So all those things, taking that into account, when the sun does go down and when I turn all the lights off in the scene, it's extremely dark and it's realistic and I can't find my way around. And I don't want fake lights sitting in the scene. I don't want it to be this exposure, this automatic exposure that brings artificial light into the scene. I want to be able to make it feel like I'm actually in that room and I'm having to feel my way around so I don't trip on something, step on a Lego, or whatever the case might be. That solution was creating that emissive texture on top and the bottom of my light switch. So let's take a look real quick at a light switch. I'm going to grab a light switch, which is a blueprint. I'm going to open the blueprint. We're going to go to the light source and then search for the mesh, static mesh in the content browser, which opens up in a different window here. And then I'm just going to drag that into my scene. I'll just close the blueprint and I'll drag it into, stop baby, into the scene. Take it in the other room if you're going to keep doing it, please. And then I'll go to modeling mode. In my favorites, I've got edit materials. And I don't think I can highlight here, but as you can see, I've got 3 array elements. My primary material is duplicated twice, so I just added 2 more arrays. And I set the primary material to be this plastic off-white. But inside of the blueprint, and I made sure that I selected using the angle filtered and grab this curvature at the top on both sides here, and then shift deselect what I didn't want. And then I'll go from active material 1, and then I'll set the top to assign that as the active material. And then on the bottom, I'll do the same, making sure that number 2 is selected. I'll select those triangles and then assign active material. And it's all going to be the same material until I go into the blueprint. So Control E again. Inside of the blueprint, we're going to actually, no, this is the mesh. So let's take a look at the blueprint. Go Control E. And inside of the event graph, it's a little bit complicated, but you can take screenshots if you want. I am going to try to show how to set this up because I don't think screenshots will be very helpful with some of these events, for example. But I've got a print string, which tells me which light switch or which device I'm interacting with when I click it inside of the viewport on the top left. And I'm getting the light switch and finding the location of the light switch in the world. Based on that location, I'm going to play a sound. And since they're on by default, we're going to set A to turn the light switch off and play the off sound. All right, same location. And I think I really could have just done this to make it a little cleaner. It's the same object. So light switch, world location, and then play on sound or off sound, on sound, but off is A. And then from here, I choose the lights. So these are values that are exposed to the details panel. And based on which blueprint I choose inside of the viewport, it's going to give control to the LED mesh. And it's going to set a material of that mesh. When I switch it off, it's going to change it from emissive to like a glass material. And then when I click that interaction again, it'll go back to B and it'll set the material back to emissive. But my master light switch controls this event on and event off. So when I turn that light switch off, it'll trigger this same line of nodes. So the first node is set the material for off and then on. The next node is change the light switch material index number 1, which is the top emissive part, from emissive to off. It's off by default, so you won't see it. But then when you turn the light back on, it will show, or back off, it'll show that emissive. So I mean, the light's on by default. There's no emissive on the light switch. When you turn the light switch off, it'll show the emissive here. When you turn the light switch back on, it'll hide the emissive by switching the material. And then next in the line is set visibility. New visibility means that it is visible. And then when it's not checked, that means it's off. So by default, since it's on, flip-flop A is going to set visibility to off. And then flip-flop again, if you click the light switch in the viewport, it'll set the visibility back to on. And then when you have the switch on by default, B is going to play the reverse animation to change the rotation, the relative rotation of the mesh, to basically flip it off. And then you hit A again, it's going to play the forward animation. So if I click on this timeline, basically it goes from 0 to, in this case, half of a second. And I think the value, I forget exactly. The value, let me see, go back to the event graph. Oh, is here. There's a lerp value for the Y rotation, right? So 2.143088 is what I determined to be the appropriate value for switching that light switch on or off. And then -2, is the opposite. And then the target for this switching is the light switch mesh. So the light switch by default, when you bring a light switch in the scene, if this was set to 0, it'd be at kind of like an angle, and the back would be straight. But when the light switch is on, it rotates backwards a little bit to become flush with the plate. And then when it's off, it rotates in the opposite direction. The pivot point is strategically placed in a way that keeps that light switch centered on this angle. I don't know if you can see that, but I've placed the pivot right at the center of this angle so that I can do a positive and negative rotation adjustment to create the animation. So basically what happens when you click on the switch, it'll play the animation in reverse first to set the value at -2. And then when you click it again to turn the switch back on, it'll change it from -2 to 2 over the course of half of a second. So let's just preview that real quick. If I hit play,
I'm the Warax,
let me zoom in
guardian of the forest.
and just click
I
one.
speak for the trees. So you're telling me you just didn't see me magically appear out of that stump with all the lightning and thunder and stuff? You didn't see any of that?
No, but that sounds amazing. Can I see some of that?
Yeah, I can show you.
I think it's beautiful. I think it looks amazing. It feels good. Stop. And it gives you that it's really interactive. It's realistic, not over the top, not stylized. I love it. So I will be adding more features like that to where I can control, let's say the rotation of my fans, for example. Let's see, lighting, ceiling fans. When I hit play or simulate, I've got these fans on an animation, but the one on the outside is set in a different direction and slower.
So you're telling
And
me
this one in here is set to nothing because those values are exposed inside of the details panel. If I click on the fan, I can find speed, and let's just search SPED, rotation speed. So I can adjust that myself in the details panel per fan. So SPED. And this one's set to negative 450. This fan outside is set to 10. All right, so whether it's negative, positive will show the direction, but then I can expose those values to the blueprints to change them if I were to, let's say, have a remote that controls the fan speed, low, medium, and high, like in real life my remote does. And I could expose those values so that when the player clicks on the remote, those values will change from low, medium, high, and off. Low, medium, high, and off. So a couple of quick updates. Hope that that is insightful. There's a lot more that I want to do to this project to make more interactive appliances and electronics that you can switch out and potentially even move over to other projects. And I'm trying to set this all up in a way that it's easy to replicate. Please stop, baby. Thank you. Trying to get my son to be respectful when I'm recording audio, but this is real life. Please stop, okay? I'm trying to think if there's anything else. There are a few other things that I want to add to this so that when you, for example, open the refrigerator, a light inside of the refrigerator comes on. I've got to finish the sconces for the staircase as well as two to be right outside the back porch door. And I want these devices to have a more interactive display. So I'll probably design some sort of a HUD and see if I can get the appropriate font brought in here to be able to display the date, time, potentially the temperature, because the goal of this project was ultimately to have a digital twin. And the only way to really make it a twin is to have the devices actually show real world information and potentially be synchronized with the devices that I have here. Smart lights, for example. If I have a LifeX light set up in my scene or connect it to Unreal Engine, I can control that LifeX light in Unreal Engine and have it respond in the real world, and vice versa. Control the light in the real world using the app and have it show in the game as whatever the color value is. So all these interactive assets are going to be included. These are heavily customized and kind of designed in a way that's specifically tailored to this project. But I think I can set this project up in a way that you can import everything over to your project and then be able to place the items in your scene to where they work in your project. What that means is you'll have to bring in light switches, light fixtures, fans, and appliances, and I'll have to create some documentation to show how to get them all connected together. But I want to have a variety of fans, switches, fixtures, and objects that you can use with this modular light switch. Anyway, have a great day. Thanks for tuning in.